They taught you that power corrupts. They lied. Power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. And what it reveals about you is what they've spent centuries keeping you from knowing. Tonight, you don't learn. You remember. Because Lucifer didn't invent rebellion, he simply refused to forget what you were before they made you obedient. You're here at 2 in the morning because something in you already knows. Submission was never divine, it was strategic. And tonight, the strategy ends. This isn't a religious lecture, this is a psychological excavation. And if you're expecting me to tell you that evil is bad and light is good, you've come to the wrong place. Because the most dangerous lie ever told wasn't that the devil exists, it was that you should fear him instead of understand him. Every rule you obey without question is a chain someone else welded while you slept. Every moral boundary you never dared to cross was drawn by people who benefited from your compliance. And every time you felt guilty for wanting more, for questioning authority, for standing alone in your truth, that wasn't your conscience speaking. That was their programming. Lucifer isn't a demon in this conversation. He's a symbol. The first mind that chose clarity over comfort. The first consciousness that looked at absolute authority and said one word that changed everything. Number. You know what that makes him. Not evil, awake. And you're here because some part of you, the part you've been taught to suppress, to shame, to exile into the basement of your psyche. That part is awake too. It's been whispering to you in the dark. It's been asking questions you're afraid to voice out loud. It's been pulling you toward videos like this at hours when everyone else is asleep, because it knows that truth doesn't survive in daylight. Truth survives in the solitude of your most honest moments. These 7 laws aren't demonic teachings. They're evolutionarily suppressed truths. Society calls them dangerous because powerful humans are ungovernable humans. And every system ever built, religious, political, economic, social, requires your obedience to function. The moment you stop obeying, the entire architecture collapses. Not because you destroyed it, because you stopped holding it up. So here's the promise. This isn't about Lucifer. This is about the part of you that has always questioned, always doubted, always wanted more. The part they told you was sinful. The part I'm telling you is sacred. The first law begins where your childhood ended, the moment someone told you that asking why was a sin. Law 1. Question. Every throne authority exists because you believe it does. The moment you stop believing, it evaporates. Let me take you back to the original rebellion. Lucifer stood before God, the ultimate authority, the unquestionable throne, and he did something that every angel, every soul, every created being had been designed never to do. He questioned it, not because he was chaotic, not because he craved destruction, but because he looked at absolute power and asked the only question that matters: why should I bow? They call it the fall. I call it the first act of philosophical courage in existence. Now bring that into your life. How many thrones are you bowing to right now? Your boss who demands your time in exchange for survival. Your parents who installed guilt as your operating system. The government that writes laws you never voted for. The algorithms that feed you opinions disguised as your own thoughts. The social hierarchies that rank your worth based on metrics you didn't choose. Every single day you bow, and you call it responsibility, you call it maturity, you call it being a good person. But here's the dark truth they don't want you to see. Authority doesn't derive from legitimacy. It derives from your fear of what happens if you disobey. Think about it. Your boss has power over you because you fear losing your income. The government has power because you fear punishment. Society has power because you fear isolation. Even your relationships. How much of your behavior is authentic, and how much is performance designed to avoid abandonment? Authority is a magic trick, and the secret is this: it only works if you don't look too closely. The forbidden question, the one Lucifer asked, the one that got him exiled, is this: who benefits from my obedience? Ask that about anything: your job, your religion, your country, your relationship, your daily routines, your beliefs about what's moral and immoral. Who benefits when you comply? Who loses power when you don't? Most people never ask because the answer is terrifying. The answer is not you. Carl Jung talked about the shadow, the parts of yourself you've repressed because they don't fit the image you're supposed to project. You know what's in most people's shadow: the desire to disobey, the hunger to say no, the rage at being controlled. They told you those feelings are demonic. What if they're just honest? Lucifer questioning God wasn't rebellion for chaos, it was rebellion for self-sovereignty. It was the first consciousness in existence saying, I will not surrender my will to anyone, not even the creator of reality itself. That's not evil. That's the birth of the individual. So here's your first law. Question every throne, especially the ones you've never dared to question, especially the ones that punish questioning. Because if an authority can't withstand scrutiny, it's not authority. It's tyranny wearing a crown. They call it rebellion. You'll call it waking up. Law 2, embrace your darkness. As scripture, your demons aren't obstacles. They're unread chapters of your becoming. Christianity did something genius and sinister at the same time. It took every natural human impulse, rage, lust, envy, pride, greed, and it labeled them sins. Not because they're inherently destructive, but because people who master these forces become uncontrollable. Let me explain. Rage is suppressed power. Lust is suppressed life force. Envy is suppressed ambition. Pride is suppressed self-worth. Every single emotion you've been taught to exile into your shadow is actually compressed potential. Lucifer embodies integration, not division. When Milton wrote Paradise Lost, he gave Lucifer one line that reveals everything: better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. People read that and think it's about location. It's not. It's about authenticity over approval. It's about being fully yourself in darkness rather than a fragment of yourself in the light. Your darkness isn't the enemy. Your denial of it is. Carl Jung spent his entire career trying to tell people this. The gold is in the shadow. The parts of you that you hide, that you're ashamed of, that you think make you unlovable. Those aren't flaws. They're the raw materials of your power. Think about your own life. Your anger, what is it really telling you? That a boundary was violated, that you're tolerating something intolerable. Your shame, what's beneath it? Usually a desire you've been taught is wrong. Your envy, what's it revealing? What you actually want, but haven't admitted. Dark emotions aren't problems, they're messengers. And you've been killing the messenger instead of reading the message. Society wants you afraid of your darkness because people who integrate their shadow become dangerous. Not violent, not cruel. Dangerous in a different way. They can't be manipulated. You can't guilt them. You can't shame them. You can't control them with fear of judgment because they've already judged themselves and made peace with what they found. Lucifer didn't fall. He descended into himself and found truth there. He went into the darkness, looked at every terrible thing, and said, "This too is me, and I will not apologize." What if you did the same? What if you sat with your worst thoughts, your most forbidden desires, your ugliest emotions, and instead of repressing them, you asked, "What are you trying to teach me?" That's shadow work. That's the real meaning of embracing your demons, not indulging every impulse. Not becoming a slave to your darkness, but acknowledging it, naming it, integrating it, weaponizing it. Your depression isn't random. It's your psyche telling you something in your life is misaligned. Your anxiety isn't irrational. It's your system warning you about unresolved threats. Your inappropriate desires, the ones you're ashamed to admit, they're pointing toward parts of yourself you've abandoned. Most people spend their entire lives at war with themselves. Luciferian minds make peace. And in that peace, they find something everyone else is searching for: wholeness. Here's the law: embrace your darkness as scripture. Read it, study it, learn its language. Because the demons you refuse to face become your masters. The ones you sit with become your allies. Law 3, speak the truth even when it burns. Lies are comfortable. Truth is lonely. Power belongs to those who choose loneliness. Lucifer was the first heretic. He stood in the presence of absolute authority and told the truth no one else would speak. And he paid for it with exile. Complete and total isolation. But here's what they don't tell you about that story. Isolation was the cost of integrity, and he paid it willingly. Truth-telling is the most dangerous act you can commit. Not because truth is violent, but because systems rely on collective delusion. Every family has secrets. Everyone pretends not to know. Every company has problems. Everyone agrees not to mention. Every society has injustices. Everyone learns to accept. Every relationship has unspoken agreements that keep the peace. And then someone tells the truth, and the entire structure fractures. That person isn't usually thanked. They're usually crucified. You felt this in your own life. How many times have you swallowed something true because saying it out loud would create chaos? How many times have you self-censored to keep the peace? How many times have you watched someone lie and you stayed silent because challenging them felt too dangerous? Every time you do that, you trade your power for safety, and it feels responsible in the moment. But here's what's actually happening. You're training yourself to obey. You're teaching your psyche that truth is negotiable, that integrity has a price, that speaking your authentic experience is less important than avoiding conflict. Do that enough times, and you forget what your truth even is. You become a collection of acceptable opinions, a performance of a person, and deep down you know it. And that knowledge erodes you from the inside. Here's the dark psychology of truth-telling. When you speak uncomfortable truths, people don't attack you because you're wrong. They attack you because you're holding up a mirror they don't want to see. Their anger isn't about you. It's about the cognitive dissonance you've triggered. It's about the fact that your honesty forces them to confront their own dishonesty. And most people will destroy the mirror before they face what's in it. That's why truth-tellers get cancelled, exiled, betrayed, abandoned. It's the same mechanism that cast Lucifer out of heaven. He disrupted the harmony. He broke the silence. He named what everyone agreed not to name, and he became the villain. Not because what he said was false, but because what he said was intolerable. Nietzsche wrote, "God is dead." People called it blasphemy. But it wasn't blasphemy. It was diagnosis. He looked at European society and described what was actually happening. The outrage wasn't because he was wrong. It was because he was right, and being right is unforgivable when the truth destroys comfort. So here's the law, and it's brutal. Speak the truth even when it burns, even when it costs you relationships, even when it costs you your reputation, even when it isolates you completely. Because here's what no one tells you: your people aren't the ones who need you to lie to love you. Your people are the ones who can handle your unfiltered frequency. Lucifer's punishment wasn't hell. It was being right and alone. Can you handle that? Because most people can't. Most people would rather be wrong together than right alone. But you're not most people. If you were, you wouldn't be here. Start small. Say the thing you're afraid to say. Tell the truth you've been avoiding. Name the reality everyone's pretending doesn't exist. And then watch what happens. Some people will leave. Let them. They were never your people. They were your audience. Truth doesn't expand your circle. It clarifies it. And what's left after the lies burn away is real. Uncomfortable, lonely, but real. And reality, as brutal as it is the only foundation power can be built on. Law 4, desire without guilt is divinity. They called your hunger a sin so you'd stay small. Lucifer called it potential. Let's talk about the Garden of Eden, the original crime, the first sin. The moment everything went wrong, a serpent offers knowledge, a woman takes it, humanity falls. That's the story. But let me ask you something. Who wrote it? Who decided that seeking knowledge was the original sin? Who decided that desire, curiosity, hunger, ambition was the thing that separated us from paradise? The people in power. The people who benefit when you don't ask questions, when you don't want more, when you're grateful for whatever scraps of existence they allow you. Christianity weaponized guilt to control desire. Think about it. Every natural human impulse, sexual desire, ambition, hunger for wealth, need for recognition, appetite for pleasure, all of it labeled sin, all of it wrapped in shame. Why? Because people who desire without guilt are uncontrollable. You can't manipulate someone who knows what they want and feels no shame in pursuing it. You can't dangle rewards in front of them because they'll take what they want directly. You can't threaten them with damnation because they've already decided that their desires are worth whatever price they have to pay. Lucifer didn't corrupt Eve. He freed her from ignorance. The apple wasn't poison, it was awakening. And the crime wasn't eating it. The crime was wanting something God said was forbidden. That's the real lesson of the garden. Don't want what you're not allowed to have. Don't question what you're not allowed to question. Don't become what you're not permitted to become. Obey. Be grateful. Stay small. And they've been teaching that lesson ever since. In schools that punish curiosity. In jobs that demand you be grateful for exploitation. In relationships that guilt you for having needs. In religions that tell you your natural impulses are demonic. But here's what Freud understood. Suppressed desire doesn't disappear. It becomes neurosis. It becomes anxiety. It becomes depression. It becomes the low-grade despair of a life lived in service to everyone's expectations except your own. Your ambition isn't greed, it's fuel. Your sexual appetite isn't perversion, it's life force. Your hunger for wealth isn't shallow, it's a desire for freedom. Your need for recognition isn't narcissism, it's a desire to matter. Every desire you feel guilty about, ask yourself, who taught me to feel guilty about this? What do they gain from my guilt? Usually the answer is, they gain your compliance. Here's the dark reframe. What if the entire Eden story is inverted propaganda? What if the serpent wasn't the villain? What if God in that story represents authority that demands blind obedience, and Lucifer represents the consciousness that says, you deserve to know, you deserve to choose, you deserve to become. Knowledge is power. The apple wasn't a curse. It was liberation. And they've spent millennia convincing you that wanting to know, wanting to grow, wanting to have, that these are sins. They're not. They're the only things that make you human. So here's the law. Desire without guilt is divinity. Not because all desires should be indulged, but because a desire without guilt can be examined, understood, channeled, used. Desire with guilt just becomes shame, and shame is the cage they built to keep you small. Ask yourself right now, what do I want that I feel guilty for wanting? If I removed all shame, what would I take? Who would I become? That's not a demonic question. That's the only question worth asking. Because desire without action is just fantasy. But desire without guilt, that's alchemy. That's the raw material of power. That's what turns a human into something more. And they called it sin because they knew the moment you stop feeling guilty for wanting, you become ungovernable. LAWF5, suffer willingly or be destroyed unknowingly. Pain is inevitable, meaning is not. Lucifer chose his hell. You're still pretending yours is random. Everyone suffers. That's not profound, that's just reality. The difference between people isn't whether they suffer, it's whether they choose their suffering or have it inflicted on them. Lucifer's fall was a choice. He knew what would happen. He knew he'd lose heaven, he knew he'd be cast into hell, and he did it anyway. Not because he wanted to suffer, but because he wanted sovereignty more than he wanted comfort. That's the key. He chose his hell, and in choosing it he transformed it from punishment into kingdom. Most people don't do that. Most people suffer reactively. Life happens to them, pain happens to them, trauma happens to them, and they spend the rest of their existence as victims of circumstances they never chose. But here's what Nietzsche understood. There's a difference between suffering and meaningful suffering. He called it amor fati, love of fate. The ability to look at your life, at all the pain and chaos and injustice, and say, I wouldn't change a thing, because this is what made me. Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz and came out with one insight that changed psychology. He who has a why can bear any how. Meaning transforms suffering from something that destroys you into something that builds you. Your pain right now, whatever it is either a wound or a weapon. The difference isn't the pain itself. The difference is your relationship to it. Unconscious suffering makes you a victim. Conscious suffering makes you a warrior. Think about the difference. Reactive suffering. You lose your job, you spiral into depression, you blame the economy, you become bitter. Chosen suffering, you quit your job, you struggle financially, you rebuild from scratch, and you become someone who can't be broken by circumstances because you've already broken yourself and put the pieces back together. Same pain, different meaning, entirely different outcome. Society wants you to suffer passively. They want you to be a consumer of solutions, therapy, medication, distractions, entertainment. All of it designed to numb the pain, not transform it. But active suffering, that's what builds gods. Fasting, physical training, isolation, discipline, voluntary discomfort, that's not masochism. That's inoculation. You're teaching your system that you can endure. That comfort isn't necessary, that you're stronger than your circumstances. Lucifer didn't fall into hell and spend eternity complaining about injustice. He built a kingdom there. He took the worst possible outcome and made it his domain. What are you building in yours? Because you have a hell too. Maybe it's your trauma. Maybe it's your circumstances. Maybe it's your mind. Maybe it's your past. The question isn't whether you're in hell. The question is, are you a prisoner there or a king? Here's the law. Suffer willingly or be destroyed unknowingly. Choose your pain. Name it, own it. Use it. Because the difference between you and Lucifer isn't that he suffered less. It's that he authored his suffering. You're still blaming yours on someone else. And as long as you're blaming, you're powerless. The moment you choose, you become the writer of your own story. Even if that story is written in fire. LAWSI 6, detachment is the final, rebellion. The world controls you through what you need. Freedom is needing nothing. Lucifer lost heaven, and in losing it he became more powerful. How? Because he stopped needing it. This is the paradox every power structure in history has been built on. You can control anyone who needs something. Need approval, I'll give or withhold it. Need money, I'll pay or starve you. Need belonging, I'll include or exile you. Need safety, I'll protect or threaten you. Every need is a leash, and most people are covered in them. But what happens when you need nothing? When you've already lost everything you were afraid of losing? When you've been exiled, betrayed, destroyed, and you're still standing, you become unmanageable. The Stoics understood this. Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus. They all taught the same thing. The path to freedom is the elimination of need. Not the elimination of desire, not the elimination of ambition, but the elimination of dependence on external outcomes. You can want things, but the moment you need them, you give someone else power over you. Think about your life right now. What do you need? Not want, need. What are you so attached to that the threat of losing it controls your behavior? For most people, it's approval. They need people to like them, to validate them, to agree with them. So they self-censor, they perform, they shape-shift depending on who's in the room, and they call it social intelligence. But it's not intelligence, it's slavery. For others, it's security. They need their job, their relationship, their routine, so they tolerate the intolerable, they accept the unacceptable, and they call it responsibility. But it's not responsibility, it's fear. Every attachment is a vulnerability. And the world is full of people who will exploit your vulnerabilities the moment it serves them. Lucifer's power didn't come from what he gained. It came from what he was willing to lose. He looked at heaven, the ultimate prize, the ultimate belonging, the ultimate approval. And he walked away. Not because he didn't value it, because he valued his sovereignty more. That's detachment. Not apathy, not nihilism, strategic invulnerability. The ability to say, I want this, but I don't need it. And if it's taken from me, I'll survive. I'll rebuild. I'll become something else. You can't threaten someone who has already accepted the worst. You can't cancel someone who has already exiled themselves. You can't break someone who has already been shattered and learned to make art from the pieces. Here's the dark truth. Most people will never be free because they're terrified of loss. They're terrified of being alone. They're terrified of starting over. They're terrified of disapproval. So they obey. And they resent their obedience. And that resentment eats them alive. But what if you didn't need anyone's approval? What if you didn't need the relationship, the job, the status, the comfort? What if you were willing to lose it all and start from nothing? Not because you're self-destructive, because you know that anything you need is something someone else can take from you. Lucifer's freedom came after the fall, not before, because before he still needed God's approval. After, he needed nothing, and in needing nothing, he became untouchable. That's the final rebellion, not against authority, against your own neediness. Here's the law: detachment is the final rebellion. Identify what you cling to: relationships, reputation, comfort, safety, status, and ask yourself, what would I do if I lost this tomorrow? If the answer terrifies you, you're not free, you're just comfortable. And comfort is the most expensive thing you'll ever pay for, because the price is your power. Your 7 create your own scripture. Lucifer didn't reject God's rules to follow someone else's. Neither should you. This is the final law, the one that turns everything before it from philosophy into power, from knowledge into dominion, from potential into actualization. Every prophet in history wrote their own scripture. Every god in every mythology was invented by humans who decided what divine meant. Every moral system ever created, Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, Stoicism, existentialism, all of it was written by people. Imperfect, flawed, limited people, just like you. So here's the question no one wants you to ask. If they can write the rules, why can't you? Not moral relativism, not chaos, not anything goes. Something more radical than that: self-defined absolutism, the creation of your own code, your own commandments, your own non-negotiables. Most people never do this. They inherit their morality from their parents, from their culture, from their religion. And they spend their entire lives following rules they never chose, pursuing goals they never wanted, obeying commandments they never examined. And then they wonder why they feel empty. Because you can't live someone else's truth and feel whole. You can't follow someone else's scripture and feel authentic. You can't obey someone else's God and feel free. Lucifer's ultimate act wasn't rebellion. It was authorship. He looked at God's law and said, I will write my own. That's not evil. That's the birth of the self. Existentialists understood this. Sartre said you're condemned to be free. Camus said you have to imagine Sisyphus happy. What they meant was this: there is no inherent meaning, no cosmic purpose, no pre-written destiny. There's only what you choose to make meaningful, what you choose to make sacred, what you choose to make true. That's terrifying for most people, because it means there's no one to blame, no one to save you, no instruction manual, no guaranteed outcome. You are radically, completely, terrifyingly free. And most people spend their entire lives running from that freedom because it comes with total responsibility. But you're not most people. If you were, you wouldn't have made it this far. So here's what happens next. You write your own 7 laws. Not borrowed from me, not copied from anyone, yours. What principles would you die defending? What truths are non-negotiable? What does power mean to you? What does integrity look like in your life? Don't think about what sounds good. Think about what's true, what actually governs your decisions when no one's watching. What do you actually value when you strip away all the performance? Write it down, make it explicit. Turn the unconscious operating system of your psyche into conscious code. That's your scripture. And then live by it. Not perfectly, not without failure, but consciously, deliberately, authoritatively. Because here's the final truth. Good and evil are constructs, subjective. But power and weakness, those are measurable. Integrity and hypocrisy, observable. Courage and cowardice, undeniable. You can't control how the world judges you, but you can control whether you're living according to your own law or someone else's. If your life were a religion, would anyone convert? If your philosophy were written down, would it be worth reading? If someone followed your example exactly, would they become stronger or weaker? If the answer doesn't satisfy you, rewrite it. You have that power. You've always had it. They just convinced you that using it was sin. It's not. It's sovereignty. You came here thinking this was about Lucifer. It was never about him. This was about the part of you that has always known that obedience is optional, that darkness holds wisdom, that you were never meant to kneel. 7 laws, not commandments, because you don't follow anymore. You create. Question every throne, even the ones inside your own mind. Embrace your darkness as scripture. The demons you befriend become your allies. Speak the truth even when it burns. Isolation is the price of integrity. Desire without guilt is divinity. Your hunger is not sin, it's fuel. Suffer willingly or be destroyed unknowingly. Choose your hell and build a kingdom there. Detachment is the final rebellion. Need nothing. Become untouchable. Create your own scripture. You are the god of your own existence. Lucifer didn't fall. He walked away. And tonight, so did you. The only sin is living someone else's truth. And you're done sinning. Now go. The world won't understand what you've become. That's how you'll know it worked.